Hello and welcome to the Business of Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Eric Rosenberg. Over the years, I've had the privilege of helping businesses in the meetings and event industry grow and succeed. And I'm excited to share that experience with you. If you feel alone and overwhelmed, and if you're looking to take your business to the next level, improve your strategy and sales, and connect with like-minded professionals, you are in the right place. I invite you to visit eventbusinessformula.com and join our community of event business owners dedicated to exponential growth. Now let's dive into today's episode. Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meeting podcast. Today I'm delighted to speak with the king of efficiency, productivity, the guy who converted me to Voxer, someone that when you listen to, read what he's doing, he wrote a book, Less Doing, More Living. But everything that he's doing about efficiency, I'm learning always something that I want to apply. For all the small business owner out there and for anyone who want to be more effective, you are in for a treat with the one and only Ari Meisel. Ari, thank you so much for taking the time today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
As I was saying in the intro, you're the one that converted me to Voxer. You did a fabulous presentation for Jason Gaignard in MMT, and I've been using it since then. I think it's absolutely amazing, and it's helping people, and it's very efficient for sure. Now, before we get into those details, what is your journey, and when did you start focusing on more the productivity, automation, and things like that?
Yeah, so when I got out of college, I found myself sort of working on this big real estate development project in upstate New York and was heavily involved in the construction side of things. And after working on that project and completing that project after 3 years, I found myself in an enormous amount of personal debt, a lot of stress, of course, related to that, physical stress on my body, and I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And Crohn's, for those who don't know, is a chronic inflammatory condition that affects the digestive tract. It is considered to be incurable by the medical community and is extremely painful and debilitating. So the short version of the story is that I went from working 18 hours a day to struggling to be able to get an hour of work done in a given day. And after a couple of years of searching and experimenting and biohacking, I was actually able to overcome the illness, get off all my meds, and I've been clinically no signs of the disease for almost 2 decades now, which is supposed to be impossible. A big part of that success was figuring out a systematic way of dealing with stress and overwhelm and functioning in an hour a day. And that is the genesis of everything that's come since, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of my productivity journey, right? There's all sorts of systems out there that get you to eke more output from your day, right? You can always get more done. But when you try to figure out what can I get done in an hour, the answer is you can't get it all done. And the things that you have to get done still have to be done. So now you have to think about who or what is going to do them for you, which is a very, very different way of thinking for most people. So that turned into speaking, coaching, books, traveling around the world on various stages. And then it began to morph into more of a business-focused methodology that I call the replaceable founder. And the replaceable founder is about making everybody in the business as replaceable as possible so that they can be replaced up, not out. And to do that, we have to abandon the ego and create systems and processes that replace the things that we do well, but not uniquely well. And I've been very fortunate to work with some really amazing companies in a whole bunch of different industries and a whole bunch of different sizes. And then I found myself on the Eric Rosenberg podcast.
The epitome of your career. Wonderful.
Right now is the pinnacle of every day.
As you were saying it, I'm thinking, my goodness, we have like 40-45 minutes. And just with what you say, I can ask questions for 5 hours. First and foremost, Crohn's disease. I don't know anyone who has been clinically cured. And have you been speaking with the doctors and were they adopting what you're doing?
Yes and no. So it's been really fascinating. I don't like to comment on the medical industry in general because I've been volunteering as an EMT for over 14 years now, and I've gotten to see a lot of different sides of things. But for the most part, most medical schools are not teaching the nutritional side of things, and more of at least Western medicine, a lot more of it's focused on treating acute problems. Personally, I don't think that there's a better place in the world if you have an acute issue, but for chronic issues, I think that we are sorely lacking. And so I've had this experience a couple of times now where I've met with a doctor for a checkup, and the last one was last year, and it had been 10 years since I'd had a colonoscopy. And we're going through history, and I was like, I always get this reaction, and I had Crohn's disease. And it was like, the pencil stops and the glasses come off. They're like, what do you mean you had Crohn's disease? I was like, I had it. I don't have it anymore. Well, just because you don't have any symptoms and feel good doesn't mean you clinically don't have any signs of it. I'm like, well, thank you for the hope, but let's find out. So that doctor, to his credit, after my last colonoscopy, he said to me, he's like, look, he said, I don't know what to say. He said, if you hadn't told me about your history, I wouldn't have known. And that's supposed to be impossible. Right. So because there's scar tissue that builds up, there's a lot of things that happen with Crohn's disease that are really not supposed to be reversible. Forget not just getting worse. And the amazing thing is that I did a TEDx talk at one point while I was training for the Ironman in France, in Nice. And I was in great shape. I was newly sort of off my meds. And I've spoken to, at this point, I think it's easily hundreds of people who have seen really great results from following the things that I did, even though I really wasn't prescribing it. And I wasn't saying that this is a cure because, yeah, technically speaking, there isn't a cure, but it's very manageable if you do the right things.
So nutritional, biohacking, if my research is correct, you not only triathlon, but you went to CrossFit, which quite frankly,
I don't recommend that.
Right? When you're experimenting, what are you looking at? What are the source of inspiration? You mentioned Western culture, but are you also looking Oriental? Are you concerned about trying something new that nobody tried before? And are you documenting that? What is the process you're applying there?
Yeah, so there were definitely some things that didn't work, and there were definitely some things that made me feel worse in some ways. I mean, one of the biggest side effects of most supplements is nausea, right? Like that most supplements, if you take too many or take the wrong combo or don't take them with food, will cause nausea, which is not what you want when you have Crohn's disease and you're already on a medicine that causes nausea. But I was measuring everything. And this is before we had ChatGPT. This is before a whole bunch of stuff. But I was able to take the massive amount of testing that I was having done, both by the doctor and by myself, and try to create corollaries and set up experiments. So first thing I did was I went vegan for about a month, maybe not even. I don't have any like philosophical issues with the vegan diet, but it is extremely hard to do well. And the problem with the vegan diet is that, like, a lot of companies have made foods that are vegan versions of things that have a whole bunch of stuff in them that you just chemical. And additionally, it's really hard to get the good fat. It's hard to get the good calories. So veganism didn't work for me, and I didn't think it was an effective thing for Crohn's. Then I was a vegetarian for about 6 months. And then I was a pescatarian, which is a vegetarian that eats fish, for maybe 3 years. And I started to feel better as soon as, very soon after I became vegetarian. The interesting thing, I still think that the pescatarian diet is one of the healthiest diets there is, but now I eat kind of anything. I think pretty clean, but I eat meat. I can eat anything now because I've healed the scars. So overall, if I had to sum it up and really boil it down, what I think is the best diet for people with Crohn's disease is one that is low in sugar and very high in saturated fats. So lots of grass-fed butter, pastured egg yolks, heritage-raised pork, grass-fed beef, all of those things. Butter particularly. I think butter is they should be able to prescribe butter to people with Crohn's disease because I think it is that effective. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that butter is called butter because of butyric acid, and butyric acid is one of the main ways that gut bacteria communicate. So fermented foods is always a tricky one. I think we need them. We don't have enough of them in the Western diet, but they can make people very, very uncomfortable if they're not used to having fermented foods. So you kind of have to ease into that. But the biggest thing is having some semblance of control over your own body and not feeling like you have this enemy inside you that's waiting to pounce at any moment.
It's fascinating. Fascinating. Not only that, but it seems to me that everything you're doing a lot of research, you're learning a lot, you love learning. I read that when you were renovating this old cigar house into loft, you went to the electrician, you went to the plumber, and then you start learning every craft yourself, which is for me, having two left hands, very impressive. But when you have this mentality, and then you say, okay, I cannot work or I don't want to work 18 hours a day anymore. And then you quickly said in the intro that you develop all this automation, this methodology. It didn't happen overnight. You're probably another overnight success that took 20 years in the making. So can you explain a little bit your state of mind? And I think it will resonate as well with entrepreneurs where things that you don't control are impacting your life. And then you started to look, what did you do? Who did you talk to? What was your state of mind? And was the first breakthrough that you remember?
Yeah, my overnight success took 7 years. So basically, I had this real estate project. I finished the project, but I hadn't sold anything yet. And I had all this debt. And then I got sick. And I got sick 1 month after I met my wife. Right. So I met her, we started dating, and then, she didn't realize what she had signed up for. So I got very sick. And my wife is French, by the way. Oh, I told you that.
Yeah.
So
we can speak. And what people don't know is that we should not speak in French in front of you because you understand everything.
yes. Well, hopefully. Yeah. So otherwise, I'll just smile and nod. It'll be fine. So I met her.
So you got sick a month after meeting her?
Yeah. And the focus at that point was still on this real estate project in upstate New York. While I was trying to sell that, I decided to come back down to New York City and out to Long Island, where we'd had some opportunities there, and started doing some projects out there. At the time, LEED was becoming a big thing. And LEED is the green energy sort of certification program. It's international. And it was really getting going at that point. So I became a LEED accredited professional and ended up building the very first LEED certified building in the county that we were in, which was great. It was huge. And I've always been in this sort of situation where because I've had, I guess I'm technically on like my 8th company at this point. And it's always been things that I've been really interested in and had some talent for. And then somebody offered to pay me. Right. So I started doing LEED consulting, which was really great, really invigorating. And one of the things that's really paramount with the LEED accreditation system is it's not just about using sustainable materials, lighting that's correct, like all this stuff that's good for the environment. It's also about making an environment that is healthier for the occupants of that space, which is a really interesting thing that we don't see, or now we do, but at the time that wasn't really a focus per se. So that was really appealing to me with the biohacking side of things, right? Because it's like, well, it's possible, it is very possible that toxic mold has an effect on my Crohn's. Right. And that's a very common thing that can happen. And even in a brand new construction house, you can get mold. And that's a really big deal. Lighting has a big effect on energy levels, air quality, like all of these things. So I think there was sort of a confluence there. And with my technology background, I got really into all of these new and cool green building materials that were coming out and being developed. So I started a blog on Posterous, which is obviously not around anymore. And I just started writing about cool green building materials that I was finding. In that process, I actually invented a green building material called papier tile, which used shredded magazine print, which at the time you couldn't recycle because it was color with ink and also glossy. So that got encased in an eco-friendly resin that I helped create, that I did create. And that was used for countertops and tiles, all sorts of things. And from that, I decided to write a book from all my blog posts. And I pitched it to this company in New York, and they asked me to do it. And my first book is called LEED Materials. So that was like 2012. No, I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe around 2012. And less doing at that point was just like a hobby. Like I was writing a blog post once a week about some new experimentation I was doing on productivity, nothing crazy. And then a new company launched called Skillshare, which is still around. And Skillshare, it's kind of like Udemy, it's an online teaching platform. But originally what Skillshare was a facilitation platform for people to teach in person. So anybody could teach anybody anything, right? You signed up, put a listing, they would handle the tickets and give you the list and everything, and you do it. So my very first class was productivity tips and tricks. I had 8 people that paid $5 each, and I showed them 12 cool apps, and everybody really liked it, and it went really well. So then I refined from the feedback I got. I was always big on getting feedback from that kind of thing, and started to teach more and more and more. And very quickly, I became one of the top New York classes on the Skillshare platform. I was teaching 40 people every 2 weeks, like at $50 a piece. And what I was doing is, as I was teaching, I was developing the framework for less doing and testing it on this audience. And then I would go back to the drawing board and teach it again. And after maybe my 9th or 10th class, this guy comes up to me and he's like, "That was such a great class. Do you offer private coaching?" And I was like, "Yes, I do." Absolutely. And it's $250 a month. You get 2 1-hour meetings with me and email in between. He was like, "Done." I was like, cool, I'm a coach now. So I've told this story before, and I always assumed that he's probably heard this at some point. He was great though. We worked together for a while. And so now I'm a coach all of a sudden. So now after every class, I'm like, by the way, I offer coaching. If anybody's interested, come talk to me. And I sort of went on the deep end and like had hundreds of hours of coaching, had no idea what I was doing, no certification, and definitely made some mistakes. But fortunately, I wasn't dealing with, too heavy of a topic. And it grew from there. So now, while that was going on, I'm still teaching the class, and the book, I finished the framework. So I had a ghostwriter do the book, and the plan, literally, like I had it done, and the plan was to give it out for free at this next class I was teaching. So I teach this class, and in the middle, my plan is at the end of the class, I'm going to give it out for free to the 60 people in the room. And this guy walks up to me and he says, I'm an editor at Tarcher Press. We're part of Random House Penguin. And I think you've got a great material for a book here. I was like, really? I was like, well, here it is. And now I became an author. So I didn't give it out for free that night, and very minimal edits. And then a year and a half later, my book comes out. So like all of this stuff is happening. And also at this point, I'm starting to sell the properties in the project. Like everything's kind of happening. My wife, we had our first child, we had 2 more kids at that point. So now, and then we moved out of the city, we moved out to Long Island. And my wife is pregnant with kid 4, and I get a call, a FaceTime video call from a number I don't know, which is like a weird thing, right? So I answer, and it's a guy named Joe Polish.
No way.
Yeah, so you know who Joe is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Joe is like the greatest connector of all connectors. He runs a group called the Genius Network, and it's like the best, highest level marketing group of marketers there is and entrepreneurs. It's amazing. And he's like, hey, I'm Joe Polish. I'm like, okay. I'm like, cool. And he's like, no. He's like, I just read your book. I loved your book. And he shows me the book, and it's got all these tabs and scribblies on it and stuff. I'm like, oh, wow. Thank you so much. He's like, you have to come speak at my event next month in Laguna Beach. I'm like, I don't know you, but okay, sounds cool. So I worked with this team to come up with a presentation. So at that point, I had launched a podcast, and I built an automated podcast production process from scratch, which again, I was like kind of ahead of the game. And so I could just record a podcast, save it, and then I was done. Everything else happened automatically after that. This is before AI. So they wanted me to do a presentation on that. Cool. Okay, so I fly in on the night before the conference. I didn't want to be away from my family too long. It was like the first time I guess it was like the second time I'd traveled to speak at an event. And I get in at like 1 a.m. I go right to sleep, get up in the morning, and I'm walking to the venue, and I meet Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach. Also had no idea who he was. He was just like a nice old guy. So I have no idea what I'm walking into.
Amazing.
So we walk into the room, and I stand at the very back, and I look to my right, and it's Tim Ferriss. And Tim introduced himself. Hey, I'm Tim. I'm like, yeah,
I know who you are.
Who you are. Wow. Because he was the only person who was like the big guy in my space at that point. I'm like, oh my God. And I probably it was like verbal diarrhea. I'm like, oh my God, this is so exciting. Blah, blah. So then Joe gets up on stage and introduces me to speak and says, Ari is the number one productivity. He's going to be the number one productivity expert in the world. He's going to be even better than Tim Ferriss. And Tim, I was like, oh,
shit.
All right, gotta go. So I go up on stage, I give the talk, and it went really well. And I get off stage, and then I met Damon John and Dave Asprey and Tony Robbins and this guy named John Bowen from the CFG Group and Dean Jackson, like all of these people who I had no idea who they were, but knew that they were big people. And like that was the big turning point in my career, that one speech. So after that, it was just, I got to work with Tony. I got to work with Damon. I worked with all these people now, and that was all because of Joe, but that was the turning point. And so since then, it's been an incredible ride.
My goodness, what a beautiful story. Thanks for sharing that. And I love it. But it's really working, and be ready for the opportunity to appear, but it's still the groundwork behind it. Now, I'm trying to imagine those people, they've seen it. They've seen it all. They've seen everywhere in the world. What was the 2-3 points you mentioned in that talk that really made them think, oh, wow, that is something that I need to use?
Because every one of them had a podcast at that point, right? Like, and podcasting as a medium was still, it wasn't new, but it was still like not saturated like it is now. So it was definitely, and a lot of them were doing it was all very manual stuff. They were hiring companies to produce it and all that stuff. It was very much still like a radio production model, I think.
Got it. Yeah. So they went first with that. When you talk about productivity, Ari, you're working with very high profile entrepreneurs. What is the widest conception or misconception that they might have about productivity that you have to debunk with them, that you're always surprised? I never thought that they would be like that, or that they will have that mindset for this?
Well, right. So that's the whole idea with the replaceable founder is there's so many things that people think are their unique ability and that only they can do. And it's very blinding, very limiting in a lot of ways, right? And so there's this really interesting concept of the liberty paradox, it's called. So it's about freedom. And so there are negative and there are positive liberties. And what most people think that they're seeking is freedom from, right? So they need freedom from the 9 to 5 if they're not an entrepreneur, freedom from debt. That was my situation, I think, in some cases. And then freedom from a company where they feel stuck, right? Where they feel like if they leave, all hell's going to break loose. But ultimately, what they need and want is freedom too. Right? It's a really important shift because if we have the freedom to leave the business, not permanently, but step away for 6 months, a year, take a sabbatical, and in your absence, the business will continue to thrive and grow. And while that's happening, you are out learning, growing, and collecting things that you can then bring back to the business as contributions. Because basically at that point, your only contribution is as an accelerant to the business. Whereas for most people at the top, they are the bottleneck. They are the reason that the company has not reached its potential.
Interesting. We go into that. I think it's regardless of the size of the company, a lot of the owner are the bottleneck, and until they realize that, it's fascinating. At the contrary, what is the thing for you that is not the misconception at all, but it's the first obvious thing that maybe you did to be more productive and that have an impact on a small business owner?
So my framework in this doing is to optimize, automate, and outsource. The optimize thing is the most important because that's where we're actually looking at what we do. And that sounds really obvious, but nobody does it. Everybody's had a situation, right, where you ask somebody like, how are you doing these days? Oh, I'm so busy. I love when people say that because then you're like, oh, okay, what are you so busy with? And literally like 9 times out of 10, they'll be like, I'm just so busy. I'm just busy. There's a lot of stuff going on, right? Like, it's like, well, but with what? Like, are you busy like eating lunch? Like, what are you busy with? And a lot of times they don't know because the human brain is really good at handling overwhelm to a point. And the way we put our heads under the water and we just keep swimming, right? And you lose sight of that you're going in the right direction or even in the right body of water. So being able to stop and say like, how are we actually spending our time? You know, like I feel like I spend 3 hours a day on email. Turns out you spend 1 and you could spend 20 minutes, right? So like it really starts with optimization, taking a hard look at how we do what we do and why we do a lot of the things we do. So that goes into processes. That goes into what are the things that you're doing on a regular basis that you really should be delegating and now automating. That's sort of the first part of any assessment that I do with an individual or a business.
Amazing. Is there something that you wanted to automate or outsource that you haven't managed yet?
No, I mean, it's good question. No, there isn't something that I've wanted to that I haven't been able to. What I haven't played around with too much yet is some of the new operator functions, the agents that a lot of the AI tools have. So yeah. I'm someone who's used hundreds of virtual assistants at this point and thousands of hours, tens of thousands of dollars of VAs. And I have not had a VA or any support at all in the last 2 years because, yeah, as an experiment almost, because I do everything with ChatGPT now and not with the operator. So it gets me right up to that point. But yeah, it would be really nice. Like right now in my Trello list, I have a dog license that needs to be renewed. It would be really cool to be able to tell the operator agent, go to the website, fill it out and do it. But it's not worth it to save 20 seconds on that. So no, so far I haven't. And the thing that I would say would have been the thing I couldn't do was I figured out a way to scale one-on-one coaching, which is not really a thing, right? So I use Voxer, as you know, and 100% of my coaching, although now it's like 99%, but about 99% of my coaching is done over Voxer. So I have clients in 17 time zones that have one-on-one, unlimited one-on-one access to me, and I probably spend 20 minutes a day talking to them.
I love it. I actually, thanks to you, when I started the coaching business for small business owners in the meetings and even industry specifically, I didn't want to do one-on-one, but Voxer is phenomenal. Thanks to you, and it's much more efficient than trying to find a time to connect on Zoom even. besides the efficiency part, which is obviously there. When you're talking about Voxer, you're talking about Trello. Is there any like the tools that you're using the most every day when it comes to your personal organization, you yourself?
Yeah, so that would definitely be Trello and Voxer. So I do all of my project management stuff in Trello. I'm a big fan of Trello. And Google Calendar is like critical for me. If it's not, I have 5 kids. Right now in my Google Calendar, I've got 27 calendars feeding into it, which sounds crazy, but it actually really, really helps in terms of organization. And it's my source of truth at the end of the day.
Yep, I agree that. When you're looking at all your week, your ideal week, take us a little bit through how much time you spend on what. I'm sure family is a very important part, but when it comes to your ideal week, give us some ideas, some inspiration for that.
Yeah, I feel like nothing's typical in some ways. Most of my morning is, getting people ready for school and fed and out the door and multiple different drop-offs. I've got a 13-year-old down to a 2-year-old. And then evening, so most of the evenings are with family stuff, but I'm also involved in a bunch of different nonprofits and stuff in our town. So I'm on a municipal committee for affordable housing, racial, economic, and social equity. I'm on the executive board of our Jewish center here. I am the vice president of our local rescue squad, and one night a week I do an overnight shift on the ambulance. And I'm also on the school board, which I got elected to this past November, and I'm planning on running for mayor in 3 years. So that's sometimes what takes up some of the nights, but at the same time, the kids have soccer and taekwondo and all sorts of things. So we're a busy household, and as long as it's all sort of managed and organized, everything seems to be okay.
So there is no dedicated hours when it comes to the pure work. It's Voxer, and you're speaking with people when you have 10 minutes, or that's it.
Yeah, I might be driving to pick up a kid, or standing at the side of a soccer match or something. And it does is it enables me to think and process. Because when you're on the spot, you hopefully give a good answer, but you're still on the spot, right? So when you can think about it, what usually happens is you end up giving a much more succinct, much more like sniper, like accurate answer.
Fascinating. I was expecting you would say at least few hours for this or for that in terms of the business, but wow. More impressed than I could ever be if it was possible with everything you do. You mentioned Taekwondo, and one of the things I read about you is that when you were traveling, you have this Krav Maga steel pen kind of things. What is it exactly? And obviously, I'm interested because I love Krav Maga and because I make sure that all my daughters are trained in Krav Maga. But I've never heard about a steel pen like that.
So the one I had was actually made by Uzi. But now I think if you just sort of Google like tactical pen, it's the same thing. And so basically it has like a glass breaker on the backside, and it's got a knurled handle. It's very nice, very nice. And you can take it through security. So,
can you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a pen. It's not sharp, so it's just very, very hard. You could totally open a box with it. Like, that's fine.
Wow.
Break a window. You could break somebody's skull if you really needed to.
Ari, I mean, I spent hours listening to you, and I'm so grateful you're taking the time today and to share that. Before I forgot, how can people get in touch with you, get in touch with what you do? I know you have the book, Less Doing, More Living. What is the website? What is the best way to get in touch with everything you're doing?
So the best place is just to go to lessdoing.com. Everything is there. But people are welcome to get on Voxer as well and reach out to me. And it will be me. It's not a VA. It's not anybody else. It's not automation. They could go to voxwithre.com. And those would be the 2 ways. And I really welcome it. And if anybody has a productivity challenge that they want to try to stump me with, I love hearing those.
Amazing. My last question for today. With all the technology, with AI, and you look 10 years down the road, how do you see your life in 10 years, and what is the ideal structure settings that you have built around you?
So I don't see a lot changing in that way, except possibly having like a physical helper in the house. That would be pretty cool. So I actually have a client who's recently bought 6 humanoid robots to work in one of his warehouses yeah. And so that's a real thing now, and it's not replacing what he's got. It's just not hiring new people. So for me, like that would be really cool to have like a robot maid and a robot chef in the house. That would be neat. But other than that, I mean, things run pretty smoothly right now, I have to say. Like it's, in some ways our life is very chaotic, but it's very organized chaos in the way that works for us. It's very motivating. So I think one of the misconceptions, right, is that we want to be more productive so that we have to do less. But the truth is that we want to achieve more, right? So it's not about doing less, it's about doing the right things.
Love it. Ari, thank you so much. And I hope to meet you in person and not only on Voxer in the future.
Me too. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Business of Meeting podcast. I hope you found today's episode valuable. If you enjoyed the show, the most important thing you can do is leave a review and share it with your colleagues. It really helps spread the word. I truly appreciate your support. And if you're ready to take your business to the next level, don't forget to visit eventbusinessformula.com to learn more about how we are helping even business owners like you. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.